Hello, everybody, and welcome to, this isn't our first sequel detailed diatribe, because we've done like 3 about Superman, but our first part 2 detailed diatribe, very explicitly continuing the theme and thesis of the first one we did, because we're back to talking about Arcane. You may recall, like, a year ago? Some amount of time ago.
Hold on. April 21st, 2023, so almost 2 years ago.
Almost 2 years ago, we did a detailed diatribe about the first season of Arcane, which was called The Unbreakable Bonds of Love and Why They Suck. It was about the theming of Arcane Season 1, which was, of course, that there are all these characters with these bonds between them, you know, familial, siblings, parent to child, partners in crime, you know, co-workers, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, wow, these guys all have such important bonds, but we all know from, like, the rules of League of Legends that a lot of these guys are going to end up mortal enemies by the end of this story.
Everyone's gotta want to fight everybody else for the sake of gameplay.
Exactly. So how are we going to connect the dots? How are we going to get from point A to point B? And one of the things that we were both very impressed by with Arcane Season 1 is that there are a lot of easy narrative shortcuts for turning characters who like each other into mortal enemies, but a lot of them are bad. And it's always nice to see a story that manages to sidestep the Revenge of the Sithing effect and pull off a more compelling schism. In fact, at time of this going up, we will have previously talked about a similar vein in the movie Transformers 1. Also this could have been Revenge of the Sith Part 2, but instead it is a very good schism that's very compelling. And we were continually impressed in Season 1 that they repeatedly looked at easy opportunities to turn characters into mortal enemies and then sidestepped them. And we're like, we're not going to do that. In fact, actually, these characters, their bonds are unbreakable. Even if they do terrible, awful things to each other, they still love each other and they can't just make that stop.
What a simpler story would deem an unforgivable act, Arcane is like, it is Tuesday in Piltover.
Yeah, exactly. So that video went up, and then Season 2 of Arcane came out, and we were 100% right about the theming of Season 1. It's always nice to be validated. And the comment section on that video just exploded with people being like, oh my god, you cooked with this one, please, more, part 2, and who am I to deny? In fact, I will say that the only thing we explicitly got wrong is the idea that Arcane was actually going to care about setting up the canon of League of Legends. It turns out Arcane could not give us a fuck.
Thank fucking God.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally fair. Who the hell wants to make League of Legends twice? But it was a little bit of a gut punch to go back and rewatch and be like, yeah, I mean, obviously by the end, this has to be the status quo going forward. And it was like, what status quo? All of these characters will briefly pass through their League of Legends portrayal and then move on to other things. It's like, great, sure, fine. But I was very interested in seeing how the theme of the Unbreakable Bonds of Love and How They Suck would play out in this season, if it would continue to be expounded upon, if it would continue to shape these characters, if someone would manage to break free of it and actually sever a bond of love. I thought it would be interesting to explore, so we sat down, watched Season 2 together.
We watched it all through together over the course of what was Thanksgiving week, soon after it aired.
Yeah,
That was fun.
I'd gotten a small shotgun blast of spoilers just by virtue of existing on the internet in the previous weeks, but you managed to avoid all of them, so I was like keeping an eye out for like what key frames I'd already seen. But yeah, no, we went into Season 2 without much in the way of expectations, only that Arcane continually managed to surprise and impress us, so we were just kind of like, how's this gonna go? Are we gonna turn out to be correct and vindicated, or wrong and bad? Turns out correct and vindicated was in fact the way to go, which slapped. So today we are going to be talking about The Unbreakable Bonds of Love and Arcane, and how in Season 2, rather than sucking because they trap these characters in tortuous situations where they can't free themselves of one another, in Season 2, these bonds of love are used instead to heal. And I think that's pretty neat, so we're going to start talking about that.
And this was something that was basically percolating very early into our watch through. I think after Arc 1, you were like, okay, I got some concepts, and as we were midway through Arc 2, you're like, I think this is about how the Unbreakable Bonds of Love are actually a very healing force. Before we even finished, you're like, I think I've got the bullet points pretty much laid out already.
Oh yeah. For reference, the previous slideshow for the first Arcane Detail Diatribe was 28 slides, and this one is 38. So we went, sorry, 37. I managed to consolidate it a little bit, apparently. So just a quick recap. When last we left our heroes in the very finale of Season 1, Jinx kidnapped a bunch of people, Vi, Caitlyn, and Silco, and basically was like, I'm going to make you choose whether I should be Powder or Jinx. But in order for me to be Powder, I get to kill your girlfriend. If I was like, this deal sucks, I I want a new one.
Jinx's fuck you, Spider-Man moment. Choose.
So it didn't go so hot. Shenanigans ensued. Silco wound up dead because somebody put all those holes in him. Couldn't be me. No idea what happened there. But then she's like, you know what? Killing him does not actually make me be Powder. Killing him makes me be Jinx, but on purpose this time. And then to really commit to the bit, she has a bit of an incandescent gamer moment and fires a rocket into the Piltover High Council at the very moment when they are about to be like, maybe we should let Zon be its own thing and stop fucking them up forever.
I was gonna call it a gamer moment, but then you said it first. You suck.
I plucked the joke right from twixt thy brain cells. If the theme of season 1 is that the unbreakable bonds of love trap these characters in these permanent, inescapable dynamics with people who've hurt them terribly, Vi and Jinx, indelible parts of each other's lives, even though they are also responsible for the worst pain that they have experienced. The theme of season 2 is that when those characters just stop hurting each other, the love cleanly reasserts itself because the bond is unbreakable. The love was never gone. We didn't get to see this in season 1 because everyone was hurting each other all the time forever.
Constantly.
Yes.
Yeah. Which it does play into the idea that the schisms in season 1 don't form at the first sign of trouble that a lesser story would make them break off into. And it plays into this where it's these people do actually like each other a lot and are willing to put up with a lot. And the schism is caused by something really, really, really bad. But then as soon as that even kind of goes away, it gets back to where we were because it's two sides of the same thing. The schism takes a lot to make happen, and then it heals faster than we would assume it does.
What's interesting is that, actually, I'm going to contradict myself, we did see this happen one time in season 1. It just quickly went wrong again, which is the moment that Vi and Jinx are reunited. Because when they last left each other, Powder had just accidentally killed their entire family, and Vi was extremely upset. She had hit Powder and then staggered off into the darkness. And from Powder's perspective, that was it. Vi left her. And then she learned, oh wait, no, she was imprisoned. She couldn't get to me. And from Vi's perspective, pretty much 30 seconds after that, she saw that Powder was in danger and tried to get back to help her, but was just black-bagged and dragged off by the sheriff and was stuck in prison for 5 years. So we already knew that Vi wanted desperately to get back to Powder, and everyone has been telling her, Jinx is bad, she's bad now, she's evil, you have to, she's not Powder anymore. And she's like, shut up, I'm gonna go find my sister. And as soon as they reunite, she knows that Jinx has been up to some shit. She's been talking to Caitlyn, but it doesn't matter. She hugs her, and they have this really beautiful moment because from Vi's perspective, it's not that what happened before doesn't matter. It's that in this specific context for their dynamic with one another, it doesn't matter. All that matters is they're sisters, and she has her back now. Shortly thereafter, things go wrong again, and then by the end of the season, the schism seems to have widened to be significantly more unmanageable. But we have already seen that the bonds of love heal the damage done even within them. The character just needs to stop doing the bad thing, and then, things get chill again, which is nice.
Going off of the incandescent gamer moment thing, I have another joke, which is that Jinx basically has the average League of Legends player experience, where it's I've been slighted, I'm gonna kill everyone.
Yeah, actually.
Average League of Legends player, literally.
Yeah, she's the only one who knows what game she's in. It does, however, take a while to get to those healing moments, because first we gotta get through just a bunch of shit. Vi trying unsuccessfully to convince herself that she doesn't care about Jinx and is willing to kill her now after the events of the season 1 finale. Victor trying unsuccessfully to convince himself that he doesn't care about Jace and is willing to leave him behind to go start a cult. Caitlyn trying unsuccessfully to convince herself that she cares more about revenge on Jinx than her relationship with Vi. And Echo trying unsuccessfully to mitigate the damage all these other idiots are doing to his actually functional social programs and cool big tree. Truly, the best boy of the season did not deserve any of this shit.
No.
But we'll get to him. In fact, we'll get to him right now, because the season's theme, specifically, of the bonds being able to heal seemingly unforgivable wounds, are anchored in episode 7, which is the Echo episode, and it is so good. This is the moment, because when we were watching the season together, we were like, wow, they're speeding through a lot. I feel like any of these musical montages could have been an episode, in their own right, and they're kind of speeding over some character moments I think would be good. And then we got to episode 7 and we were like, here we are. This is what we've been wanting. So after a massive Hextech explosion, Echo wakes up in an alternate timeline, and we get a glimpse of the good version, the good ending.
Good ending. League of Legends isn't happening.
Yeah, genuinely. And this is basically basically tangible in-story proof of how close Piltover and Zon really are to lasting peace, because their conflict is a huge part of Season 1 and 2. That Piltover is this gilded metropolis of decadence and classism, and Zon is the underclass, you know, the trash pile that Piltover pretends doesn't exist and just, you know, forces people to live in and be miserable. And then episode 7 is like, these guys are like one bad tragedy and a small number of social reforms away from actually being fine. Because in this timeline, during the Season 1, Episode 1 hijinks, where our squad of plucky young protagonists rob what turns out to be Jace, in this timeline, the explosion of that gemstone killed Vi. Doesn't seem to have killed anybody else, and the death of this innocent child by illegal magical research in Piltover seems to have caused some widespread soul-searching. Now Piltover is Hextech free, Zon is doing way better, with much if not all the class division wiped away. Zonite kids participate in Progress Day invention competitions. The bridge between Piltover and Zon that has been representative of all these terrible, horrible conflicts is now completely open and decorative and lively as these people like actually talk and live amongst each other. The pollution of the Undercity appears to be almost entirely gone. Vi is deeply missed, but her surviving siblings, all of them, including the brothers that died in Season 1, are healthy and happy and all just kind of vibing. And most tellingly, Silco and Vander are both still alive and have explicitly forgiven each other for their past mutual murder attempts. And Echo is absolutely blindsided by this. Like, of all the things that shock him, the fact that Silco and Vander are buddy-buddy is the one that completely throws him for a loop, because, of course, from Echo's perspective, Silco murdered Echo's dad, basically. He's been fighting him and what he represents since he was tiny. And just seeing him buddy-buddy with Vander, and of course his own father, Benzo, is here, and Benzo? Whatever. Rip to that guy, died in episode 2, shame. But he was really nice, and he's here and alive and like older, and it clearly absolutely gets to Echo that like, oh, this is truly everything I ever wanted. Like, Echo gets his own Black Mercy episode, but this one's real, and he actually could stay here and it would be fine. Yeah,
it's crazy for Echo because on the one hand, like, okay, yeah, you know, Zon and Piltover have made up. It's like, okay, this is a weird, fucked up alternate universe where I guess I can conceive of this happening. But then when it's like these two people who I know and who I did not know to ever be like this are acting in such a way, that is not alternate universe fuckery. That's like something in the circumstances of everything has seemingly changed in order to allow these two to be friends. But what we can kind of glean as the audience is like, no, if circumstances weren't so fucked up, they would have been friends anyway.
Yeah.
It's not that, like, the world is really weird in order to be able to make things happen. It's that Echo comes from the bad timeline where circumstances conspired into basically the only scenario that could make them be this, like, fucky and like, mean and evil to each other.
Yeah, and he's like, how could you forgive each other that easily? It's like, well, you know, you can forgive a lot. It's more important to move forward and stuff like that. And this is all very interesting for Echo, who is probably the character in the show who has consistently held the most grudges. Well deservedly, to be completely fair. But, like, when he's introduced in episode 7 of season 1, in his, you know, grown-up Firelight version, he's very suspicious of Vi, and he's the one who's like, you don't understand what Jinx has been up to for the last several years. You don't understand how bad this is. He's the one who, like, keeps the score and is trying to actually, you know, work for the benefit of everybody, but that means he has to keep track of, like, who's a danger, who needs to be stopped, that kind of thing. So just ending up in, like, the happy fun Care Bears timeline where everyone is, like, chill and rubbing elbows with people who they could easily have been actually trying to murder, it completely throws him, and he just kind of spends the whole episode sort of baffled by, oh wow, it really would be that easy. Because from his universe, it seems like this is all impossible. He's been on the front lines fighting for this kind of social reform since he was a kid. And, you know, he's done a lot of good work with the Firelights. He's created a haven where people can be free from the constant, ongoing, basically war between Piltover and Zon. And he's doing his best to keep it safe. And then he comes here, and it's like there's no work for him to do here because everything is already fixed. And it's like the little tiny amount of work he was doing in his own universe doesn't make a dent on this one because the whole city is just made better. And it was just because of one little twist of fate that made everybody take a step back and be like, what the fuck are we doing? That's a kid. What happened? But it is worth pointing out, this is a little bit oversimplified, isn't it? This is a little bit sanitized. Arcane's been very explicitly using the split between Piltover and Zon as an allegory for the division between the characters in show. Most blatantly Vi and Jinx, sisters, sister cities, but you also get Caitlyn and Vi. Caitlyn is she's got a lot of unexamined Piltover classism that comes through when she's talking to Vi. There's that really telling part in season 1 where they're touring Zon scene together, and Caitlin is like disgusted by everything she's seeing and completely thrown. She's like, oh, what's this garbage pile? And meanwhile, Vi's like, this is my childhood bedroom, you ass. So, and she doesn't quite call her out on that, but it's clear that it really gets under Vi's skin. Jace and Victor have the same thing. Jace is very much man of progress, poster boy, golden child for Piltover. And then Victor is like from the Undercity, like crawled his way up out of the gutter to try and, reach this level, and he's still in Jace's shadow. Of course, Vander and Silco, despite both being from Zaun, they're also pitted against each other in kind of the same way. But while a personal relationship can in many cases be mended just by making the choice to forgive and move forward, as we've seen with these characters in episode 7, the metaphor creaks a little bit when you apply it to a massive societal system of injustice and exploitation. Like, Piltover and Zaun are sister cities, but it's not like, oh, they had an argument, but they'll kiss and make up. Like, it's a very unbalanced scenario. It's a hyper-capitalist system of police brutality that treats their poorest citizens like animals that deserve to live in a poisonous garbage dump, and it's a little bit weird and, dare I say, kind of fucked up to imply that this can all just be like made better by everybody like shaking hands and agreeing to stop. What are we doing here, right? Like,
yes and no, because I think the implication is like a system that is fucked up and oppressive can simply choose to not do that at any point in time. Whether or not they do is obviously the hard part, but it's like none of this is hard coded into the fabric of the universe. Like, systems that are built to hurt people and extract value from one group at their expense to the benefit of another can simply rearrange some things and make a lot of that go away. Like, police brutality is not a fact of the universe. Like, that could just stop whenever. So it is a little bit kind of incongruous to suggest like, oh, Zaun and Piltover can simply forgive each other. It's more like, well, Piltover can kind of, like, both of them could be fine if Piltover decided to stop at any point.
Yes, and the good news is the show agrees with you completely. Arcane is acutely aware that Piltover holds 100% of the power over Zaun. This point has been made over and over and over again. At the end of season 1, when Jace and Silco meet up, that's Jace's angle, is like, look, your chemtech warriors are scary, but you are not actually going to make a dent on us. You're just going to scare the High Council, and then they're going to come here and crush you like a bug. So as an act of mercy, I am going to suggest that we all stop doing this bullshit, okay? So, like, the show has always been very aware that this isn't like, oh, both sides are bad. It's like, no, Piltover is 100% responsible for the circumstances of Zaun. It's not Zaun's responsibility to turn the other cheek and forgive Piltover. It's Piltover's responsibility to stop actively hurting Zaun. And in the episode 7 good timeline, this is the change. Zaun didn't forgive Piltover and wasn't like, oh, please won't you stop, being terrible to us. Piltover finally crossed a line in its own head and like realized what it was doing as a group to the innocent children of Zaun. Like, maybe we don't get to see exactly how the dominoes fell, but the only changing point is that Vi died due to an illegal magical experiment left unattended by Jace. And clearly Piltover was like, oh, okay, we fucked this up bad. You could imagine maybe Heimerdinger was like, I've been saying for ages, exploitation of power is always bad, yada, yada, yada. Whatever happened definitely happened in the episode 7 good timeline. Piltover realized it was treating Zaun terribly, and it stopped. And this general vibe extends into the entire rest of the season. Nobody is ever obliged to forgive anyone for the harm they do, past or present. The onus is always put onto the person who inflicted the damage to stop actively doing that and to fix the damage if they can, and at minimum to just like stop making it worse. And whether a mending of the relationship follows or not is up to the injured party, but because the bonds of love in the show are canonically unbreakable, it does often happen. And this specific angle of the theme is anchored in the character of Caitlin. So let's start talking about Caitlin, because she has a very busy few episodes. So part 1, very beginning of episode 1, surprise! Caitlin's mom is dead now, because Jinx blew up the whole council chamber, which Caitlin's mom was in, and now she's dead. So Caitlin is introduced in the season, absolutely boiling with grief and fury, and she's burying them down very deep so that she can appear stoic.
With the help of a lot of Linkin Park blaring in the background.
A lot of Linkin Park, and a lot of very creative animation stylings, using like charcoal graphics to show how colorless and washed out the world feels with her right now. But she's furious at Jinx for pulling the trigger, and at herself for not pulling the trigger on Jinx when she had the shot, because Vi begged her not to. She wants to hunt Jinx down, stop her and also avenge her mother in the process. And she's only made angrier when Zonite forces attack the memorial service for Counselor Kiraman and the others. And so in retaliation, she goes through her first little bit of girl boss evolution and decides that instead of being a glorified meter maid, she is now leading a tactical strike force of badasses, mostly because there's not enough government officials left to tell her no.
Yeah.
And she, you know,
girl boss to fascist pipeline with
we'll
the
get
help
there.
of
We'll get there.
Medarda.
But she's got, at this stage, before Ambessa gets her mitts on her, she's basically like, I have, because of my family and the influence of my family, I have power and clout in the city and actual physical power over some of the inner workings of it. It's truly the most like Nepo baby vigilante justice thing I've ever seen. She starts unleashing the Gray, which is, you know, remnants of the mining that used to take place in the fissures in Zon, which is like the way, way worse version of the pollution they already have down there. It's implied that it was growing up in this that's why Victor is as sick as he is, and Caitlyn's like, oh, this seems like a really useful way to clear the streets so I can get Jinx where I want her.
We gotta reinvent World War I trench warfare from first principles.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, the gas mask look is an absolute vibe, okay? And one key point is that the Gray was actually sealed away by Caitlyn's own mom, because she was like, it's fucked up that we're making them live 24/7 in actual poison, so we're gonna seal this away. And Caitlyn's like, seems like I have a very big supply of it then. She's literally undoing her mother's good work and unleashing a very literal manifestation of Piltover's violent exploitation and disregard of Zon. And Vi is also there, trying very hard to support Caitlyn in this because she feels responsible for Caitlyn's mother's death because she was enabling Jinx in her desperation to get Powder back. So Vi is clearly, like, obviously not happy with basically anything, but she's also not showing that because she's not about to fight Caitlyn when Caitlyn is in the middle of just her absolute worst day ever. So nobody's telling her no, and she's really upset. And Caitlyn's unexamined Piltover classism comes back to visit the class. She calls the Zonite attackers animals. She flushes them out with poison gas like rats. And there's a couple other subtle elements of this that I think are kind of cool because they tie back to her characterization in season 1, where she clearly still thinks of the enforcers as automatic good guys and Zon as the automatic bad place, which is that thing we saw in the initial episode where they're first traveling through the Undercity together. She never actually takes any time to see what Vi sees in the Undercity. She's just like, oh, I'll save you from this dreadful place, basically. And now that, you know, she's also got this extra reason to be all fucked up and weird about it, this is all just shaping all of her actions. She's like, I am the hero here. My team of badasses are the cool strike force of superheroes. We're going into the place where the bad people are, and we're gonna make them all suffer. This time, Vi is too focused on supporting her in her grief to call her out on any of this shit. The extent to which Vi is supporting Caitlyn through objective, actual war crimes is that she tries to convince herself that Powder is dead, Jinx is someone unrelated, and therefore exempt from the unbreakable bonds of love, and now it's her duty to stop Jinx. And it's not super convincing, but like, it doesn't need to be convincing. She just needs to believe it long enough to take the shot.
Yeah, Caitlyn's whole thing is, it's an interesting perspective that is born of the fact that she does not, the unexamined Piltover classism, like, she does not see Piltover as culpable for basically anything. It's like, oh, Zon attacked us out of nowhere. What the fuck is up with that?
Yeah.
Everything we do in response is completely just and proportional. And it's... Ugh.
Yeah.
There unfortunately are real world parallels, but we don't have time to unpack all of that.
We don't need to get into that because the show gets into that. And for the last little bit of the part 1, Caitlyn's mom is dead part of the presentation, Maddie, a newly introduced enforcer, also highlights a lot of Piltover's gilded bullshit. When she first meets Vi, she's like starstruck. She describes her as a legend among the enforcers, who, lest we forget, murdered Vi's first set of parents. She spent her entire life fighting them, running from them. She was brutalized by them for 5 years while illegally imprisoned by them. So, like, yeah, of course she's a legend, but, like, that's not like, wow, you're so cool and awesome. It's like, damn, you make it really hard for us to keep torturing you in prison these days. And also Maddie's like, now that old corrupt sheriff is gone, the enforcers are back to being a default and de facto force for good. Obviously, we are the good guys. It says so right on our funny little badges. This is literally the bad apple cop narrative, which is not good. And she also tells Vi, it's nice to know there's still good ones left, and she could either be talking about cops or Zonites. Either way, It's bad. it's Schrodinger's dickhead here, but she's bad on both ends.
Yeah.
And Caitlyn's shittening comes to a head at the end of episode 3 when denied her vengeance on Jinx by Vi's intervention again, because the scenario is that Jinx is a relatively stationary target, but she also has a tiny child on top of her. And Caitlyn is like, that's fine, I won't hit the child. And it's like, oh yeah, because having somebody get fucking headshotted 3 feet from you, max, is a completely painless and non-traumatic experience. Anyway, she's really, really upset that Vi stopped her from potentially shooting a child and definitely scarring a child for life. Says it's her blood in your veins, bludgeons Vi with her rifle and abandons her at the bottom of a big hole. Holy police brutality, Batman!
Come on, Vi, you'd make a terrible fascist.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. So that's fun. That's fun. And then at the end of the episode, she's rewarded for her bad behavior when Mbessa declares her basically God Empress of Piltover and is like, all right, good job, Miss Kiraman. Now you're in charge, and I'll just put myself right behind you. Don't even worry about it. This takes place in the Girl Boss to Dictator pipeline, as discussed. Surprise! This conflict hasn't just been happening organically. Mbessa's been stoking the flames because she wants Hextech weapons, because she's got her own war going on, and she's like, this place will make a great arms dealer for me and my still slightly vague aims. She facilitated the attack on the memorial service, intentionally sabotaged that little beautiful bit of class solidarity between Vi and Jace to take the win for herself and reinforce the narrative that Zaun is the common enemy and only overwhelming force can bring them to heel. For this purpose, Caitlyn makes an extremely useful pawn for control of Piltover because, what is it, council member Sallow, I think? He's like one of the only ones who survives, and he's such a little whiner. It's great. But he's like, ugh, that Kiraman girl sucks. It's so annoying how everyone automatically listens to her because she's from like a noble house that everybody respects. And ugh, I can't believe how annoying it is that just everybody really falls into line behind her. And you can see Mbessa doing like the calculations, like fascinating.
Like a cat doing trigonometry in its head before making a jump.
Exactly. So Mbessa puts Caitlyn in charge, and everyone's like, yeah, I guess this foreign warlord that none of us actually owe fealty to can just do that, because what's the government going to do? It's like 3 people now, and they all agree with Caitlyn. But what we get through the resulting series of police brutality musical montages is that this clearly takes several months, and Caitlyn has time to simmer down. She can't actually hold on to that level of like absolutely incandescent rage for very long. After a while, running the city single-handedly and trying to grind Zaun down, well, that's not what she's trying to do. She's just trying to grab Jinx. It's just that, like, Noxus keeps being like, oh yes, and in order to do that, first we need to get all these dissidents in line and throw them into prison. And it's clear that Caitlyn is like, this is way shittier than I thought it would be. This isn't like the cool superhero hunting down the bad lady. This is actually just being incredibly terrible to Zaunites, who are technically our own citizens because we didn't give them independence. So we're just being really awful to our own people. And it's clear the moment where she kind of stops being clicked into Mbessa's version of things is when she sort of steps back and is like, you keep saying like, you know, we're doing this for lasting peace, but why is peace always the justification for violence? Which is kind of the whole like, wait, are we the problem? Is this conflict still going on because we're causing it? And again, that's the theme of the season, is that the person with the power causing the harm is the one whose responsibility it is to stop it, because Zaun has been fighting back against Piltover, trying to make them stop, and like Echo and the Firelights were fighting back against Piltover, trying to make them stop, and also fighting back against Silco, trying to make Silco stop making Zaun even worse. And the person who's being, you know, harmed and oppressed can fight back, but they cannot make the person stop. The onus is on the person who's doing the damage to stop doing the damage. This is when Caitlyn kind of takes a little step back and be like, oh, are we the entire problem here, actually? Is this all because of us?
Rare but very important moment of introspection from Caitlyn here.
Exactly. And Mbessa immediately kind of tries to nip it in the bud, starts appealing to her, like, emotional...
What? No! No!
She literally turns to the fireplace and starts stoking up the flames while she's like, perhaps you're stronger than I am. Maybe you have the strength to forgive them, which, you know, I probably should have included that in my list of evidence for my whole theming in this season. But anyway, part 3, Butch Unfumbled. Caitlyn and Vi get back together shockingly quickly, but it also does kind of make sense. A bunch of other stuff has been happening in the background, and Caitlyn and Vi reconnect outside of Victor's definitely not an Eldritch Nightmare hive mind pacifist commune. And it's very clear that, like, they're still both upset. Or rather, Vi is still very upset. Justifiably so. Caitlyn feels like a little bit more awkward, honestly. Like, she's definitely gonna still be mad about me doing the whole police brutality thing on her and leaving her down a big hole. Like, yeah, okay. And Vi's pissed, but just immediately very snarky. And they're just back on the same wavelength. Shockingly quickly.
It's shockingly fast.
Yeah, like they both make digs at each other's character redesigns, and then suddenly it's like, oh, wait a minute. It's like we never left. And Caitlin also learns that Vi's dad Vander is still alive, sort of, long story, and is in dire need of help that only Victor can provide. And like Ambessa has the entire army lined up about to storm the commune to try and get Victor's like power for their own, and also Jinx, I think. And Caitlin is like, okay, you know what? This is more important. And she immediately has Vi's back, even knowing that Jinx is actively working with Vi towards this goal. And this is a little bit of a lurch, except for the part where it completely proves my thesis correct. Because, oh look, this bond of love was unbreakable. And now they are immediately back because they're no longer actively hurting each other. They're back on the same wavelength. They've had some time to chill out. Caitlin has had time to cool off and stop being such a huge, massive problem. Vi has had her own bullshit going on, but mostly she's had time to stop feeling like she needed to handle Caitlin with kid gloves, because from this point forward, Vi is not afraid to, like, push back on Caitlin, which she was very reluctant to do for the first few episodes. She was going along with absolutely everything. Like, the only time Vi pushed back on her was when Caitlin tried to give her the Enforcer badge, and Vi was like, what the actual fuck are you doing? But she relented on that. She was like, this is clearly very important to her. This is her way of saying, I want you on my team, and I can do that. She was not happy, but she still, you know, she acquiesced. You can tell she looks so miserable in that scene. But at this point in the show, Vi's like been through a bunch, has been processing a bunch of other stuff, and it's like, okay, yeah, Caitlin's upset, but Vi has never been one to handle people with kid gloves just because they're upset. And so now they're just being honest with each other, which is a huge step up. And Caitlin has had enough time to gain perspective and to stop being an active problem. And now she's back to being willing to listen to Vi and Vi's moral compass, which is a huge step up from where they were at the beginning of the season.
That's new.
Yeah, but it's not that much of a change. They've just both had time to cool off. Neither of them are holding grudges, although Caitlin better not be holding a grudge. Literally nothing wrong happened. Anyway.
How dare you stop me from almost shooting a child?
Yeah, and
as soon as they're out of the immediate scenario that is causing them immense distress, they're able to meet back on a much more like even neutral footing. And Caitlin, even, you know, having been in dictator mode for the past couple episodes, is like, oh wait, actually I can be chill about this.
Yeah, maybe I can actually simply choose to stop. Now I will say, probably would have been good to show Caitlin actively apologizing. I certainly wouldn't have minded seeing that. I think that Vi deserves a lot of things in the show, and an apology would be like low on the list, but it's still in there. But I will say it does match many themes of the show for her to not explicitly do that, because the show's never been interested in prioritizing apologies and forgiveness when it can instead focus on harm reduction moving forward. And the more telling character moment is not what words they exchange, but it's the fact that Caitlin and Vi are just immediately clicked back into sync with each other. Caitlin basically needed one good reason to stop following Ambessa's plan, and Vi is that reason. And so together they orchestrate a classic captured on purpose gambit and serve Ambessa her first and like only one of two legitimate defeats in the entire show.
Vi and Caitlin also knew exactly what they were doing with some of the choreography in that captured on purpose gambit. Yeah, punch me, spit on my face, yeah.
You're gonna need to blindfold and handcuff me for this part. But it's tactical, bro. It's totally tactical. This also, I will say, plays into Vi's own characterization. She has never held a grudge past the point of a character reunion. Like, oh, Powder killed their family. She's very upset in the moment, and then as soon as they reconnect, she's just so happy she's alive. Oh, Echo KO'd her, kidnapped her, and Caitlin, and also is accusing her of being a traitor, and honestly, she's just really glad he's okay. This fits the theme, and I think it would have been nice. I think it would have been nice to get an apology, but I completely, like, it's not a game breaker. I think that it actually makes a lot of sense why they didn't choose to have that conversation on screen.
The season has to get through a lot of stuff really fast.
Yeah, maybe we could have done a little music video for the apology. Get through quick.
Interpretive dance music video.
Yeah.
It's, I think that was a lot of people's difficulty with the season, is there's a lot of stuff that doesn't fit the tempo that we kind of came to expect from the first season. And I think it's for the best that they change things up, and having the variety is always good. The first season's still there.
Oh, yeah.
But I can understand people who expected a certain cadence of storytelling, because when we were watching it together, I was like, this is going a little quick here through some of these things. It's there's the opportunity for every character to interact with every other immediately relevant character for their plot, but the space to breathe where a lot of the really good slow moments and more lengthy discussions happened aren't there. They're often kind of implied, in this case by Vi and Caitlin's actions, more so than their actual specific words. We do get a little bit of that conversation later in the following episode, but it's still a case of like,
yeah.
feel like I could have stood to see some of this.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, the primary complaint I had about season 2 is I think it needed to be twice as long. Like more time. Just the first 3 episodes could have been a whole season, and like. I'm not going to say like, oh, maybe they had like a longer season order and it got cut. I don't think that's what happened. But I do think that they had a lot of plans and they maybe didn't compress them down to the episodes that they had as cleanly as they could have. But I do think, I still think the show is really solid and what we get to see is really good. And maybe some of it is a degree of trust on the part of the creators that like they trust the audience to, connect the dots when the dots are provided. There's a lot of times where the characters show with their actions what they're feeling and thinking rather than telling it to the screen. And anyway, I do think, however, that it is worth unpacking the specific angle of how could you just forgive them that easily. I'd say variants of this are the #1 criticism I've seen of the show overall and season 2 in specific, because these characters will just do truly awful things to each other, and then they will move on. And it's like, well, if that were me, I probably would have let myself be a little bit of a bitch about it for way longer than that person. The show actually takes a very interesting angle on it, which I haven't really seen explored, which is not that, forgiveness is like the healthy thing to do, it's good for you. The show kind of implies that actually forgiveness is the easier approach. It's the path of least resistance. Because what we see with Caitlin is that when she has like 8 months to stew and simmer with nothing to do but like follow Aunt Bessa's directions on how to best subjugate a city in ostensible pursuit of the person who killed her mom, holding that grudge starts taking active effort. It's like, it's actually so difficult for her to remind herself, like, I'm mad at Jinx. Jinx did this terrible thing to me. Which is interesting because in the first couple episodes, like, the absence of her mother, Cassandra Kierman, is, like, constantly affecting every waking moment. She's constantly being reminded, like, she's gone and they're expecting, like, they're all just acting like I have to take her place now, but, like, that's not going to make her not be gone, and that's still true. But it seems like after having a significant-ish number of months to possibly a year to digest that, it's no longer actively hurting as bad as it used to.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just, it's like it used to be a fire that was motivating her, and now it's just this kind of dull ache that's left her very empty. And holding on to the grudge is the harder approach. And, we've seen this before. Vi, very angry about a lot of things. Most of the time, this does not actually, like, surge up in present conversations with people. Like, she never tells Jinx, like, I can't believe you killed our family. Like, she never pulls that out. She's not, like, looking for ammunition in an argument.
Yeah.
They both know. All right, they know. Jinx is the one who will bring up, like, no, I've got a lot of practice killing my loved ones. Hee, I'm coping. But Vi never does that. It's very interesting that the show almost puts forward, like, forgiveness is not a moral or personal obligation, but given time to heal, it almost becomes the natural approach. And when given the opportunity, the unbreakable bonds of love can reassert themselves. And, like, we even see this back with Silco and Vander. Like, his hatred for Vander was motivating him through the entire first season, his anger at being betrayed. And he still builds a statue to him and even reconciles with his memory. And again, in episode 7, we see how close those two really were to, like, forgiving each other. The road not taken is not that far away from the road we took. But there is only one character in the show who cannot forgive the horrors of their past. Oh, look! It's the most popular character in the show! What were the odds? So Jinx is in profound personal agony forever because she cannot forgive Powder. Her entire identity is built on the fact that she cannot forgive Powder. Powder killed her whole family, drove away her sister. Powder messes everything up. Powder is a Jinx. Jinx is only good for breaking things and hurting people. And at the end of season 1, she gets this reaffirmed when she accidentally kills Silco. And then she spends the first part of season 2 just in a profound actual depression. I feel like Arcane and Castlevania are shaking hands in the we're portraying depression and it's profoundly unsexy department. She gets shaken out of it by accidentally adopting Isha, a very Powder-like, small, nonverbal child. And through a dynamic with Isha and Savika, Jinx begins to actually kind of develop. She seems to start to believe that maybe she can actually do some good. She can fix things. Building Savika a new arm is like a big turning point for her because this is the first time she's built something for the explicit intent of helping somebody else.
Yeah.
Goes and does a prison break to save some Zonite Jinx fans from a Piltover prison lockup, and then has a fight with Warwick the werewolf, who turns out to be Vander. Holy fuck. And this is also a pretty big moment for her because her entire crisis has been built on the fact that, as far as she knew, she killed this guy. It was the worst day of her life, and it was her fault that she killed him. And now he's here, and he needs help. And she immediately goes to Vi. Like, Jinx is gone on right now. This is Powder basically going, Dad needs help, and I need you.
Yeah.
And it's...
And even still, like, when Jinx comes to Vi with this, Vi is like, okay, yep, off we go.
And it's beautiful because, like, we suddenly see Jinx believe that there is more to her and her life than just breaking things and hurting the people she loves. If Vander can be saved, maybe their family can be healed, and maybe she can finally forgive Powder because she will have undone her greatest mistake. Unfortunately, that is not the timeline that we live in. So that doesn't work out. In fact, things end significantly worse than when they started because that adorable small child I mentioned, you know, the one who was too good for this sinful world, too pure, yeah, that didn't go so hot either. So she blows herself up to stop Vander, which doesn't work, but good effort. And this, of course, also recreates the circumstances of Powder's first most horrible tragedy. Eerily similar, you could say, of one of Jinx's inventions blowing the absolute fuck out of her loved ones.
Yeah.
And now she has another crushing wave of unforgivable guilt to drown in. And again, she's far worse off than she was earlier in the season. Except Vi forgives her again immediately as soon as she learns that Jinx is in lockup. And by the way, she yells at Caitlyn about it. And it's like, oh, there she is. She's not afraid to actually start punching back again. Even in this moment, like, when Jinx is in lockup, Caitlyn seems quietly, sorrowfully understanding when Jinx says she didn't know her mom was in the council chamber when she blew it up. It probably wouldn't have changed her mind, but she didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's like, from where Caitlyn was at the beginning of the season in relation to Jinx to this is a very good indicator of how Caitlyn's rage has just turned to long-term grief, and how she's no longer like, if I can just, like, kill this lady, everything will be fixed. She's like, oh yeah, no, we're all just hurting, and it sucks, and it's just sad. Sometimes things are just sad. But the fact that people keep forgiving Jinx for things that she can never forgive herself for clearly gets to her.
Yeah, it feels worse when you do a bad thing and you don't get the response that you think you deserve. It's like, no, you're not supposed to do this. I think this is why sometimes when kids are being rebellious, like, they're trying to find the line where they actually get disciplined for it. And if there is no line, they'll just keep pushing and then feel worse about themselves. It's like, well, I'm waiting for consequences to show up because I clearly deserve them, so I'm going to keep doing worse things until I get those consequences. But it doesn't happen, and now I just feel terrible because I'm being an awful person.
Yeah, and also, like, they're not mad at me, they're just disappointed in me, and now it feels like I've hurt them, and oh god. So Jinx essentially comes to the conclusion that as long as she's in these people's lives, she will continue to make them worse. She's fully bought into the idea that everything she touches breaks apart. You know, she makes everything worse, and she leaves. She locks Vi in the jail cell and says she deserves to be happy. She doesn't need to keep ruining her own life trying to chase her down. She's gonna go break the cycle, by which she means blow herself up. But fortunately, Best Boy Echo is back with a brand new time machine, and he's here to fix this, or at least make it less of a problem in the immediate present. And he does manage to get through to her. Again, Best Boy, actual MVP of the season, hard carrying the team.
Yeah.
It seems like through their brief, again, mostly off-screen conversation, Jinx seems to come to a realization, a new perspective on this thing that she was expressing in the jail cell, which is that, like, hey, you should let me leave you behind. You know, you should stop chasing me, stop making me a part of your life. I'm bad for you. And it seems like she kind of flips on that and is like, okay, I guess I'm an indelible part of your life. I guess there's nothing I can do to leave you behind. So let's just start owning that, you know? Let's just start owning the fact that I will always be with these people. You know, I can't undo my effect on their lives, so let's just commit to the bit. Which has been a thing she's been doing continually. I mean, the whole identity of Jinx is that, you know, she's like, I was called a Jinx and then I did something terrible, so I guess I am a Jinx. I guess I'm going to be doing this on purpose from now on. And that makes it not mental illness if I'm doing it as a bit. And now it's like, okay, I guess if I'm a permanent part of these people's lives, I may as well own it and be as loudly and positively me as I can. So she rocks up to the final battle in absolute style to actually help out and save the day. And I do think that this specific bit of Vi and Jinx theming comes through in the final couple episodes in very overt ways. We were actually talking about this when we were watching the show. We were like, it's nice how absolutely unsubtle a lot of the symbolism in this show is.
Yeah.
Things like Ambessa literally stoking the flames while she's trying to get Caitlyn back in war mode.
I love literal symbolism in all of its forms. It's just so clean. It's so clean writing.
You can tell the Fortiche Studios mostly makes AMVs because that is exactly the kind of shit you get in the good AMVs.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the specific motif of Jinx realizing that Vi will never let her go comes back in a very sad way in episode 9, which is mad respect to. They basically just make it literal. They're dealing with Vander, who has now been completely stripped of all of his humanity, but they have some fights. They have some complex shenanigans. A bunch of other shit is going down that we will be talking about in some of the later slides. Once again, Vi and Jinx are like the simplest part of the show, but a lot of other shit is also happening that's shaping their lives in complicated ways. But they have the big fight, and it looks like Werewolf Warwick Vander is dead, and then, of course, Vi has a complete emotional breakdown again, because, boy, this just keeps happening, doesn't it? It's amazing to lose the same dad twice. But Jinx, off at a safe distance, is, you know, saying what she always says, Vi, you can't save him. And she's been saying the same thing about herself for 2 whole seasons now, basically. It's like, you can't save him and you're going to get yourself killed trying. And Vi, to her point, her inability to give up on people is her greatest strength and also her deadliest flaw. She is the character who embodies the unbreakability of the bonds of love. She is the character in the show who loves the most fiercely and the most consistently, and it does absolutely terrible things to her constantly. But it is her primary thing, and Jinx also does, but has been trying to get Vi to stop doing that. Because when somebody who you care about cares about you in a way that becomes profoundly self-destructive, you probably want them to stop. But unfortunately, Jinx cannot convince Vi to stop, you know, hurting herself trying to save her.
Jinx doesn't have the magic time reset machine
like
Echo did when he was trying to get Jinx to stop immediately blowing herself up.
Yeah, the symbolism rapidly becomes literalism. The subtext becomes text. Werewolf Vander attacks. Vi can't bring herself to fight back, so Jinx comes in to save the day. And I do think it's worth noting that, again, Vi always sees characters as like the original version of themselves. She's very bad with people changing. She explicitly tells Caitlyn, like, everyone in my life has changed, promise me you won't change. Like 10 minutes before Caitlyn does a police brutality and drops her down a big hole. So she cannot see Warwick as like new threat thing that's about to kill me. She sees it as Vander. So she can't fight. I mean, she probably could have fought Vander as like a fun little play training thing, but she can't fight Vander in this circumstance. She can't try to kill him. But Jinx is very aware that people can change and become dangerous monsters. So she rushes in to save Vi. And this leads to the final scenario. Vi's clinging to a crumbling metal bridge, she's holding onto Jinx, Jinx is dangling over an abyss, and Vander is clinging onto her. And the platform cannot take all their weight, and it's about to collapse, which will kill all 3 of them. Vi, as is her wont, is holding on desperately to the people she cares about the most. She can never ever bring herself to let anybody go. Fortunately, Jinx is already prepared for this. So she reiterates, always with the assists, and she does what Vi can't. She disengages the gauntlet and forces her to let them both go, because that's a choice Vi could never make for herself, but it's a choice that Jinx has already made for her. This is the physical manifestation of the interaction they already had in the prison where Jinx left her behind. And I think that's a really nice literal symbolism way to cleanly communicate to the class what exactly is going on. And also, this whole previous fight really highlights the core theme of, you know, the unbreakable bonds of love and how they heal, which is like, as soon as Jinx stops actively being a problem, she is a tremendously valuable ally. Like, she really does come in and just not single-handedly save the day. It mostly helps that she brings Echo here to actually single-handedly save the day. But she comes, like Vi said, like, if you used all that explosive potential of yours for good, like, just imagine what you could do. And she does. She gets out on a really high note, comes in with the last hurrah, converts her entire base into a flying machine, and just rocks up the most absolutely stylish Zaunite royalty that there's ever been. And it rules. It's really cool. And it just highlights, like, yeah, if Jinx would just stop being bad, she works really well with every single one of these people. So meanwhile, in the other part of Arcane, Jace and Victor are undergoing their own extremely complicated scenario.
Jace having the absolute fucking worst time of anyone in the entire show.
Yeah, I think it was probably intentional that they gave Victor a very kind of Jesus-y resurrection and then healing people with a touch, and then dropped Jace into actual hell. It's like...
he touches a big blue orb and gets rocketed straight into the 9th circle.
Yeah. All right, meet in the middle now, bitches. So Victor, for his part, is transformed by the Hex Core and is now magical and purple, and he has the power to heal people with a touch. And all Victor has ever wanted to do is reduce suffering. And when it comes to the unbreakable bonds of love as the core theme of the show, suffering is kind of the flip side of that coin. It's like the bonds of love are unbreakable, which means if the person you love causes you harm, there is no escape. And Victor's entire goal has been reduce suffering. If things make you hurt, make them stop.
He's basically like genocide Buddha, as much as he's like visually Jesus coded. Like theologically, the whole thing of Buddhism is like just no attachments, reduce suffering. And it's like, what if we did that, but like in a genocide-y way?
Yeah.
Would that be cool? Is that fun?
It takes him a little while to step up to the genocide part. Initially, it just kind of seems like everybody he heals ends up almost a little bit weirdly pacified and lacking their own will, which is bad and slightly worrying, but they all seem happy, so it's maybe fine. But the bad side is that Jace, when he got fucking railgun shot into the ninth circle of hell, got to see the eventual outcome of Victor's peace and love commune cult thing, which is a completely dead world, a blasted wasteland littered with the nearly inanimate mannequin corpses of an entire planet, unified through Victor's power. And there, he meets a much older Victor, who explains to Jace that it took this culmination of his dream for him to understand that creating a perfect world free of suffering is also creating a dead world. There is no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit.
Yeah, this is a really good line.
It is. It's so good. Bangers only in this season, which makes Victor's angle on this make a lot of sense. In fact, his side in this whole discourse of, unbreakable bonds of love, what should you do about them? He kind of has an interestingly unique perspective on it, which is that he seems to think they're irrelevant. It's like, okay, if the bond of love is causing the problem, get rid of it. It's only the end of suffering that matters. Almost the first thing he says after being healed is that it was affection that held him together with Jace, and clearly that's not important anymore because he steals his blanket and fucks off to start a cult. So okay.
Yeah, it's such an interesting misreading of almost everything by Victor, where Jace clearly had not been a perfect partner. He did some things that caused Victor's various levels of distress in season 1, not limited to cold reading and completely wrong. Like, how could you go to the Undercity? Jace, I'm from the Undercity.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that Victor is so willing to just be like, bloop, cut everything off, where you see this very messy scenario of the interlocking drama of Caitlyn, Vi, Jinx, Vander, Silco, and frankly a million other characters as well. But Victor is like, wouldn't it be easier if we didn't do that bullshit, and then just cuts it all out and is like, oh no, he's actually like the one character that is categorically wrong is Victor.
And it's interesting because he doesn't get there immediately. Initially, all he's trying to do is help people. In fact, he does a lot of work to try and help coax Vander's humanity back to the surface. It is only after, from his perspective, Jace betrays him and shoots him that he's like, and then turns down his like, join me and together we can rule the galaxy kind of thing. Then he's like, all right, I guess this bond of love thing isn't working. Fuck it. Let's just turn everybody into puppets. And even then, Victor is still trying to do it, quote unquote, right. He's like, I'll give the glorious evolution, but only to the people who want it. Yeah. He's not quite lost in the sauce yet, but he's getting there. And it's pretty clear that he's sort of reaching the conclusion that makes sense, which is like, okay, I fixed suffering here. Oh, but there's suffering out there too. Well, I gotta do something about that. All right. Oh, they're suffering over there too? Come on, guys. So, like,
after episode 6, Victor's like, Tumblr is having Jace's over party. I will participate.
Yeah. What an interesting hashtag this is. And I do think that it's quite interesting that the glorious evolution, it's kind of like Victor is sort of like if you give a mouse a cookieing himself into world domination. Like, oh, well, I fixed things in my lovely little commune, but now there's problems outside the commune. And, this nice ambassador lady is suggesting that maybe we use this to, like, stop these bad guys. Okay, yeah, we can do that. And it's just like, Victor, no. Victor, the plot, you're losing it.
Victor and Caitlyn have very different arcs in their enshittening phase. Victor, I guess, kind of like episode 8 and 9. Caitlyn mostly in episode 2, 3, 4. But they get the idea in their heads of like, yes, I can solve this quickly and easily. And then they are both needing to be proven catastrophically wrong thanks to a couple unbreakable bonds of love.
Yeah, you're right. They both kind of get, like, goalpost moved into attempted world domination, because with Caitlyn, it's like, if I just have complete control, I will be able to hunt down Jinx, and that doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it keeps not working. And with Victor, it's like, if I just had complete control, everyone would be, there would be no more suffering. And it's like, yeah, kinda, but, like, not for good reasons.
How Caitlyn's enshittening arc is precipitated by Vi not ever pushing back on anything. A lot of Victor's enshittening arc is thanks to the scientist lady whose name I forget, whom
Sky,
he evaporated and turned into goo in episode or in season 1. She's in his like celestial like little mind palace thing and is like, Yeah, Victor, like the Glorious Evolution seems like pretty pog. You should totally like get that moving. So it's interesting that they are both able to become the worst versions of themselves because they think they are working as a team with someone, but it's actually really a lot of their own ideas just getting catastrophically spun out of the worst scenario.
I just had the thought of like Victor, you know, linked with the hive mind of humanity being like, Mods, ban this guy. Lasering Jace. Chat, how we feeling? Oh, okay. But yeah, so it is interesting that we do get both of those characters experiencing similar, like, if I just had absolute power, everything would be okay, and then being like, oh, fuck, wait, that's not working. Maybe more absolute power will fix this. But I do also think it's interesting that, like, the whole, like, oh, Vi never pushes back on Caitlyn. She does right at the end when she's like, Caitlyn's crossing the line, and we kind of glossed over it, but it's this beautiful moment. As soon as Isha's in the fight, Vi and Jinx are back on the same page immediately. Again, it's an Unbreakable Bond of Love thing. Like, they snap out of it. They're like, we were trying to kill each other, but there's a kid, and now that's what matters. Like, suddenly they're back in sister mode. Again, the Unbreakable Bonds of Love just reassert themselves immediately as soon as they stop actively trying to harm each other. And suddenly, Caitlyn is the third party problem where it's like, no, we're not playing anymore. The kid's in the way. So we're not gonna potentially shoot a child. And as soon as Vi pushes back, Caitlyn is like, oh, I can't believe you're also turning against me. And then, you know, has her little police brutality drop down the whole thing. And then she clearly has a long time to be like, oh, that was fucking stupid. And from that point forward, when Vi pushes back on her, Caitlyn listens. And I think that is a huge, but like kind of understated point in her character development. Because like now they're more like equals rather than commanding officer and lieutenant, which I think is good. It's a good way to change it.
As much as Arcane does a lot of things very literally in their dialogue, framing literal metaphors and music videos about how much I love blowing shit up when a character is depicted blowing shit up.
Oh, yeah.
There is a lot of stuff that is genuinely quite subtle, and how you see the way people act and interact changes, and characterization and growth is kind of interpreted through that, which is one of the rare places where Arcane is not like mallet, like Hextech hammer, literal bashing you over the head with the point.
Yeah.
And I think because of that, people aren't necessarily looking for it on a first pass. So it's like, why are these people like this? And there's a lot of stuff going on under the surface, but Arcane kind of trains us to look for the big, obvious, glowing signposts for stuff.
Yeah.
So it can, like, not to say it's a fault, not to say, it's the children who are wrong, but like, I can see why some of this stuff gets glossed over, because the show does not necessarily cue you into how to read these things when it is usually being very overt.
For sure, yeah. I think that Arcane is a show that dramatically rewards overthinking. There is almost always layers and nuance to which, like, oh, the themes actually hold together really well. But by the same token, if you go into it and you don't specifically aim to connect the dots, there will be points where you're like, what the fuck is happening actually?
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the whole Victor Jace situationship thing. So as Victor sort of, if you give a mouse and cookies his way into Glorious Evolution, we start seeing his stake in this Unbreakable Bonds of Love thing. He clearly is still very attached to Jace. I mean, as soon as he has like a hexcore mannequin body, he like catwalk struts in and has the world's most homoerotic fight with Jace. Mel's in the room. Anyway, Jace, join me and together we can rule. Yeah. Pardon me while I just wrap my legs around you real quick. But I do think that as soon as Jace is like, no, he's like, okay, well, I tried. Anyway, let's start eradicating all attachment. And that isn't great. Like, it's not like Victor's stated goal is like, I think love is stupid and we should get rid of it. He doesn't think about it like that. He's very scientific about it. He's like, oh, the suffering is the problem. We'll fix that. And, you know, everyone connected through Victor seems to lose a certain degree of their own will, and it's not clear how much until he has that, like, near-death experience after Jace blows him up, and everyone in the cult who he's touched collapses and starts screaming at the same time, and it's like, oh, I think maybe those healing hands were doing a little bit more than healing. Like, that's not what the fuck that should be.
I remember when we were watching this sequence, like, as they show up in the commune, it's like, oh, this is going to go very, very wrong. And it's like, okay, you know, points for, you know, the most obvious foreshadowing layup in the entire show, but the degree to which you can maybe slowly piece together what's happening inside all of these people's heads. And then when it all goes wrong immediately, it's like, oh yeah, this was actually very bad from the start.
Yeah, it is funny though, because like after those episodes dropped, because that happens in episode 6, which is like the end of the second drop of episodes, and I saw so many people being like, I can't believe that Jace showed up and for no reason at all destroyed Victor's beautiful little pacifist commune. And I was like, if shooting one guy causes everyone that guy has ever touched to collapse mindlessly and start shrieking an otherworldly airless scream, whatever the fuck was going on in there was not a pacifist commune, my guy. That was something else. I don't know, whatever. Reading comprehension. Anyway.
On Tumblr?
No, surely not. But yeah, Victor starts moving forward with his, okay, we're gonna weaponize this. We're gonna, for the good of everyone, you know, the glorious evolution, we're gonna make this work. The final outcome of this, like this stage of it, is that Vander goes berserk, as mentioned. And it's heavily implied that this isn't just, oh, he was touched by Victor's healing and that means he lost his mind. It seems like Singed did the thing Singed said he was going to do, where like, I can do this thing to remove the last of his humanity, and then we can just... So that causes Vander to go berserk, which is deeply tragic. Then he shows up in his final glorious evolution mode, and there is no Vander left in him, basically. His humanity is gone, and thus he can just freely attack his daughters in a way he couldn't before, because that unbreakable bond of love doesn't apply if Vander's not home, you know? Like, he's not in there anymore, basically. And so we see the execution of Victor's, you know, vision. Like, we remove suffering from the person and also their capability to hold these bonds that make them suffer. So they just become this terrifying weapon that the people they love are trying to stop. So that's cool. Like, a good effort. Definitely probably could have, you know, gained some perspective beforehand. But I think that this makes it very clear how Victor actually ties into the theme, because initially I wasn't sure how he fit into this. And I wasn't trying to, like, square peg round hole this thing. It's like, if something doesn't fit the theme, it doesn't fit the theme. But this was like, oh no, Victor actually does have a stake in the unbreakable bonds of love. He thinks they're irrelevant and is finding ways to bypass them. And it's like, okay, yeah, cool, that makes sense.
Genocide Buddha strikes again.
Yeah, but of course the only person who can snap him out of this is Jace. You know, his bravest little meow meow. And Jace shows him through his memories the future that Victor's actions will lead to. Not the pacifistic utopia free of suffering that Victor envisioned, just a world of broken dolls and a much older Victor who made Jace promise him to fix this if he could. And Victor, who had dismissed the bonds of love as irrelevant to his greater purpose, realizes that, oh no, wait, there is no point to all of this if humanity is lost in the process. And his connection to Jace is what snaps him out of this and makes him realize the error of his ways. It's never stated directly outright, but this does tie in with what he did to Vander and what therefore this caused in the final fight with Jinx and Vi. By stripping away Vander's humanity and his ability to suffer, he inflicted extra terrible suffering onto Jinx and Vi. You know, stripping away the ability for a person to suffer only works on that one person, and it dramatically harms the people who care about that person. Like, truly it would have only worked in the grand scale if Victor did it to absolutely everybody. And at that point, you get the bad ending that Jace spent his fun summer vacation in.
Oh no, Tumblr is having Victor's over party now.
Oh,
shit.
No. But again, the bond between Victor and Jace is unbreakable, and as soon as Victor snaps out of it and stops actively causing the harm, he and Jace are back on the same page, and they're doing what they've always done, which is working together to use magic to save the world.
Yeah.
And so the theme comes back. Even when the characters are physically separated, even after everything they've done to hurt each other, there is no getting rid of them and the role they've had in each other's lives. And no matter what they've done in the past, they can always move forward together into the future. And this specific key theme is articulated in the final episode by everybody in their own way. It's how Echo finally talks Jinx down from the whole blowing herself up plan, which is like, no matter what happened, it's never too late to build something new. Jinx tells Vi that she's always going to be with her, even when their worlds apart, and then she brings that back for her little final sacrifice. Jace, at the end of the road, says all he wants is his partner back, and Victor's like, why do you persist after everything I've done? And Jace is like, well, I promised you. Really promised older him. And at the very end, Vi and Caitlyn, the only two people in this show who get an unconditionally happy ending, except for the fact that Jinx is gone, presumed dead. Vi and Caitlyn's dynamic is the one that remains unbruised and actually kind of nice. And she tells her, I'm the dirt under your nails, Cupcake, nothing's gonna clean me out, which is the grossest way to say it. Mad props to Vi for never attempting to be even slightly romantic.
It's what they deserve.
It's what they deserve. It's what Caitlin signed up for, and she knows it. And so this really makes it clear that, like, okay, this is the central theme. This is the core of the show. These characters who have done such terrible, awful things to each other, it is never too late to simply stop doing the bad thing and move forward together. And the hard part is just convincing the person causing the problem to do that, which is pretty beautiful. But on that note of that being the hardest part, the interesting exception to this theme, seemingly, is Mel Medarda, because not every Unbreakable loving relationship survives the series unscathed. In fact, one person leaves the series completely devoid of the relationships that define them, and that would be that would be Mel, who has suffered more than Jesus in this season. So the quick rundown of everything that Mel loses in the season is her close assistant Alora, her brother Kino, who she never actually had, but she thought she did, and then he turned out to be fake and was actually just a ruse being worn by the sorceress who was fucking with her. I think that's LeBlanc. I haven't been paying attention to league lore. Jace is an interesting case, actually.
They were close in the first season.
They were close. They had like this loving romantic dynamic, and like Jace and Victor had their own thing going on. There's that moment where Mel like wakes up alone and Jace has gone to Victor's bedside because Victor is dying, and Jace is freaking out about it, and it's like, oh, does he care about him more than me? It's like, no, I think he cares about you both. I think there's two different categories. It's like, oh, I could stay in bed with my girlfriend, or I could go to the bedside of my dying lab partner, and it's like, I think anybody would probably be like, look, I'll be in my girlfriend's bed more than just once, but how often is my partner going to be dying, right? Because they were close, but they're almost the case where I'm like, was their bond of love unbreakable? It feels like this is the only one where the bond actually broke. Jace gets sent to actual hell, and Mel gets fucking back rooms, and by the time they make their way back, they're basically just completely different people, and they
I think they have almost nothing to say to each other when they're back.
Yeah, their closeness is completely gone. Just about the only thing that they talk about initially is Jace is like, if you've had magic this whole time, why couldn't you protect everybody in the council chamber? And clearly, specifically, who he means is Victor. Like if Victor hadn't been grievously wounded by the explosion, he wouldn't have needed the hex core to heal him, and then Victor wouldn't have gone all Jesus-y and caused all these problems. So like, it's like, if you had magic, why couldn't you just use it? And then he's like, I'm sorry, that wasn't fair. And that's almost the last thing they have to say to each other. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, you know, they still care about each other just on principle, but they're very different people, and that bond that they shared is just gone. And I think that's the only case in the show where we see two characters grow apart and actually just kind of let that separation happen.
I also think that part of it is that their relationship in the first season was definitely a marriage of convenience for both of them.
Oh, yeah.
Mel saw utility in Jace, and Jace saw some measure of comfort and kind of like his ladder upwards into joining the esteemed ranks of Council and Co. in the form of Mel. They got things out of each other, but I don't know if I would ever call that one like an unbreakable bond of love. They cared about each other, but it definitely is not the same because it was never the same. I think maybe Alora is the closest example where, like, yeah, sure, they liked each other, and she gets got by the Black Rose pretty early on.
Yeah.
But they're an instance where they liked each other, obviously, but when they diverged enough, the things that drew them to each other in the first place are simply gone.
Yeah, I do think that that's a decent part of it. It does seem like in the first season, Jace was more emotionally attached to Mel than she was to him. Initially, she was like, oh, he seems interesting. He seems like he's got a lot of potential. Hextech could put Piltover on the map, and by extension, me. And she always seems a little bit thrown when Jace is like actually like attached to her and is like, yeah, you know, you're just making me feel like the impossible is possible. And she's like, oh, I do? Crazy.
Wait, what? We were just smashing. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't want to like diminish the value of their, you know, relationship. I do know that a lot of people are very attached to the ship, but I do think that they are both so different. Like, Mel is completely out of the political shenanigans game by the end of the season. She's like, her priorities look extremely differently than when she thought that diplomacy was her primary strength, and now it turns out to be actual magic. And Jace is no longer an easily malleable political puppet. He's got his own shit going on, and it's real bad, and he's like been through the horrors and seen what he can I think the Jace that Mel knew was constantly enamored by the potential of magic and what giving it to the people could do, and now he's like, everything I've worked for has to be destroyed, actually. And so she's like, okay, yeah, we have to work together to tear down what we've built. And that's a very somber occasion. And it's interesting to me that of all of the bonds of love in this show, this is the only one that seems to have genuinely just kind of faded as the people that they were, you know, that they loved just no longer exist in the same form. But of course, she also loses her sense of identity as a Medarda, which was very important to her in season 1, because it turns out that her mom had her out of wedlock. No idea who her dad was, but it seems like Ambessa sought that person out specifically so that her kid would have crazy magic powers, so she could use her as a weapon, which is super fucked up. Hell yeah, Mother of the Year.
Classic Ambessa.
Ambessa, actual peak villain. She's so cool.
The unbreakable bonds of arms procurement.
And of course, Mel also loses, last but not least, her pacifistic outlook, that war is a failure of statecraft and that there is always a diplomatic alternative to violence. And of course, she also loses her mom, but that one was on purpose, so like I didn't really want to include it in the list, although it is key to the later points.
Yeah.
Because theme-wise, this throws me for a loop a little bit. It almost feels like while everyone else is having these extremely complex interpersonal bonds, Mel is the only one who's just losing things over and over and over again. But I think that theme-wise, she actually fills another interestingly unique role. This is the other side of the people change motif that Jinx and Vander embody in this season. Mel is on Vi's side of the equation, which is no matter how much you want it, you can't make people change. Mel and Ambessa have this, this unbreakable bond. We talked about it back in season 1. The bond that they share hurts them both in different ways. Mel feels like she can never live up to Ambessa's expectations. Ambessa feels like it's harder to do war crimes when her daughter is judging her for it. We're both
weakened me, she keeps saying.
Yeah, we're both having bad times, okay? But Mel is unable to make Ambessa change her ways. No matter how well she argues things, no matter how many good points she makes, Ambessa has her angle on things and she's not going to change it. She thinks that changing her mind is weakness, and if there's one thing Ambessa is not, it's weak. And again, Mel and Vi have more in common in this season. They both see their parent in true monstrous aspect, but while Vi witnesses Vander's transmutation into a literal actual werewolf and is helpless to stop it, but is also helpless to change him back, Mel already knows that her mother is a wolf. Ambessa has not changed. For Mel, that's the problem. Ambessa has not changed and will not change, and Mel cannot change her, which is a problem because Mel's entire MO for the first season was manipulation. It was making people change their minds. Like, before she figured out that she was an actual magical girl, that was what Mel thought her greatest strength was. It was diplomacy and manipulation. She was a political player who believed that violence was the brutish alternative to diplomacy and talking things out. Which again is the nice, polite way of saying that you're manipulating people into doing what you want them to. Like, yeah, diplomacy is the nicer alternative, but it is based on playing people and, using them as tools. And we saw she was very good at playing the game. She was a little bit startled when Jace got actually, attached to her, because initially she was definitely using Jace for what he could give her in the city of Piltover. But, we know that she's got a good heart in there, but her primary strength was making people change their minds, and the one person she could never, ever do that with was Ambessa. And she's also pitted against characters like the Black Rose Sorceress, who I'm just gonna call her LeBlanc. I'm assuming it's LeBlanc. I don't know how many other Black Rose ladies there are. League fans, tell me in the comments why I'm wrong about the lore again. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about Ambessa and Mel's dynamic is that they are both kind of in a deadlock. Mel's like, I need Ambessa to stop being monstrous and damaging, and Ambessa's like, I need Mel to toughen up and start being monstrous. And unfortunately, by the end of the season, Ambessa wins that conflict.
Yeah.
They love each other. That part can't change. The bond is unbreakable. They've both tried and it hasn't worked. Mel even obligingly says that outright in the first season. Even though her mother banished her, some part of her still loves her and she can't change that. But the thing is, it doesn't matter if the love is unbreakable, if the person you love is about to do the horrible thing and they aren't about to stop. The whole theme that we've been exploring with this presentation is that the bonds of love mean that any relationship can heal if the person causing the problem stops. But Ambessa is not going to stop, and Mel can't make her stop. And Ambessa is also causing a tremendous amount of collateral damage in the interim.
It's like the relationship between Vi and Jinx is like, Jinx is causing all of this collateral damage, and Jinx feels bad about it, and Ambessa's like, no, this is a feature. This is the point, actually.
Yeah.
It is a similar kind of dynamic on paper, but the applications and the degree is much different, where, Jinx causes some trouble. Yes, absolutely. Jinx did not bring in a foreign army to topple the entire government of Piltover and Zon together.
Yeah. Yeah, Jinx's entire gimmick is like, whoopsies, I did a thing and then some stuff blew up. Like, some of the damage she does on purpose, but the most of it is just like bad luck. Truly, that is the vibe. And sometimes she's like, yeah, it's fun that that thing exploded. And sometimes she's like, oh god, I just blew up another family member. God damn it. Ambessa's doing this shit on purpose. Ambessa has made the active decision to do this. She wants this. She's proud of doing this. She cannot be convinced to do otherwise. Appeals to her compassion don't matter. Because, like, worst comes to worst, she will always fall back on, I'm doing this to protect my family. And, like, even when the family is Mel, the person she's actively attacking, she's like, nope, I'm still doing this for you. This is still for the greater good. And you can't stop me because I believe in that more than I believe you. And so Mel comes to understand the limits of her diplomatic power. Nobody can be made to change. You know, people can be manipulated and played, but Ambessa cannot be. And it doesn't matter how well-crafted Mel's arguments are, Ambessa will only ever see these things as weaknesses. So Mel does what Jinx does, and what Vi and Echo can't do. She kills the person she loves because it was too important to stop the harm they were doing. And we saw both Vi and Echo have that chance and not take it with Jinx. Yeah. Especially, it was fun with Echo because in season 1, he talked a big game about like, Jinx has to be stopped. And then they had their Dynasties and Dystopias fight scene, and then he had the kill shot and was like, no, I can't do it. I like her too much. And then Jinx was like, oh, thanks. I'll just blow us both up with our grenade now. It's like, Jinx, now. But yeah, Mel did what only Jinx could do in this show. And again, we saw Jinx do that with Warwick. She recognized what was going on. She knew Vi couldn't save herself, so she saved her instead. And, you know, Jinx is real good, very practiced at killing people she loves by now. So Mel does the same thing, and it's rough because that means that in the deadlock between Mel and Ambessa, Mel lost. Ambessa won. Ambessa changed Mel into something like her, because Mel could never change Ambessa to be someone like her. Yeah, I think I've talked myself into believing that this actually does perfectly support the theme. Yeah. I wasn't sure when I started, but yeah.
Unfortunately, you're completely correct. Unfortunately for Mel.
Unfortunately for Mel, yeah. I am, you know, I'm now excited to see what they do with the Noxus show, because like initially I was like, oh yeah, you know, Arcane was popular, let's do a spin-off, but like no, if we actually get to focus on who Mel is now that she has actually stripped away every previous part of her characterization, including her pacifism, I will be interested to see where she goes from there, and I think that'll be cool. Yeah. As a little bonus round, the soundtrack also says I'm right. I thought we could do just a quick little rundown on some of the points where the soundtrack specifically spells out what I was saying, which I thought was pretty funny.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Main one, To Ashes and Blood, which is the score that plays during the fight between Vi, Caitlyn, Jinx, and Savika, which basically says outright, if you just stop, everything will be okay. The conflict itself is the enemy. Stop being the problem. Every sin will be forgiven if you lay down your weapons to the ground. That's the big one I kept coming back to, where I was like, yeah, that's truly the entire theme, is like, hey, it's never too late to actually stop causing the problem. Which is interesting because, again, Jinx's whole characterization, like, started off like, oh, I do this stuff by accident, I'll do it on purpose now, and then it'll be on purpose, and then at least I will not be a plaything of fate if I'm doing all this damage deliberately. But this is like, hey, it's never too late to just stop that, to actually just stop being the problem and like chill out. And I also wanted to highlight, I can't pronounce that right because I don't know French, but it's a song that plays during the dance between Echo and Alternate Universe Powder in episode 7. All the lyrics are in French, so it might go over your head if you don't know French like me, but you read them out and it's literally just like, wow, you know, hey girl, I really like you, but also I really don't like you because you're a huge problem. But man, I sure do like you.
My milieu ennemi is literally my best enemy. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're my best enemy. You better run away, girl. I'm a monster. Together we're not good, but also I really like you and I love you and I hate you and I love you and I hate you, and it's just so fun because it's like, yeah, that's the vibe. It's like, man, I just can't stay away, but also being together is bad, but also if you just stop being a problem, we could be together and it would be fine.
The fucking duck season, rabbit season, je t'aime, je t'ai, je t'aime, je t'ai.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I need the GIF editors in the audience to get on that one.
Oh god.
I went through all of the lyrics for all the songs, and it's funny how many of them are just like, I'm miserable and things are bad and I'm mad about it, which is good, you know, that's also useful. But like for the specific theming of this, of like forgiveness and healing and moving past, they didn't have many music videos for that for some reason. I actually think that Mimiya and the Me is the last music video insert in the show.
It might be because the pacing doesn't support it for episodes 8
and 9. Yeah,
because the show does, we've talked about this elsewhere, but the show does something that I can understand why people found it frustrating, to be like, oh, we're going through a lot of like plot happening, like all of Caitlyn's fascist girl boss era is covered in this musical montage, but I really like that they do it that way as something that's kind of clever and fun and artsy rather than being like, as you know, Caitlin has been a fascist for the past 7 months. It's like, if it's exposition or musical montage, like musical montage every single time. And it's something that I can understand why like Fortiche will do, because that's their bread and butter, making music videos for League of Legends. Like this is all part of the thing, and it's kind of fun as like almost like a meta thing to put League of Legends music videos into the League of Legends television show.
Oh yeah,
it is genuinely very cool. But it is a kind of storytelling that every other media is, I don't want to say too cowardly, but like wouldn't ever think to go for that. But it's really effective to be able to have music going in the background, whether you're listening intently to the lyrics or not. It's very efficient storytelling, because then when you go back, it's like, oh yeah, no, they're spelling it out for me, aren't they?
Yeah, no, genuinely. I really liked how they did the music video inserts. I liked them a lot when they did them in season 1. Again, Dynasties and Dystopias was incredibly good, and then it just kind of kept being cool from there. And I don't know, Fortiche is just so damn good at making music videos. I think it's completely within their right to flex, and I think it worked really well.
Yeah, this is what you asked for. Heavy is the crown. You're right, Linkin Park.
That was the other thing, because like when I was going through some of the lyrics, I was like, oh yeah, some of these are just about like, man, yeah, being a girl boss doing crimes, it's pretty hard. It's like, yeah, but like, it's like, no, where's the theme of forgiveness? It's like, you don't get forgiveness. This is the music video about being the worst version of yourself. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fair. This is about everything I had specifically listed. In conclusion, still don't play League of Legends. You good?
Yeah, no, I'm good. God, it's so fucking funny.
Thank you.
The slander.
Anyway, but yeah, no, so that's my, I guess, rundown on what I think the key angle of the show is. It's always fun. When we did the first one of these detailed diatribes, there were a few comments like, man, I love that every time I see a video essay about Arcane, they're all saying completely different things about it. And that's how you know a work of art has a lot of layers, I think, when everyone's analysis just picks a completely different aspect of it to focus on. And in this one, I think that, you know, I always love character-driven stories, and Arcane is very character-driven, and the dynamics between those characters are what makes it so juicy. Like, it doesn't matter that these two, you know, large-in-life superheroes are having a fight. It matters that Mel is fighting her own mom because she's finally been pushed to the breaking points of diplomacy, and also she's a wizard now.
On the subject of, like, every video essay is something completely different to say, one thing that we talked about as we were watching it was the idea that this season is really weird in that every character gets slotted into the like archetype role of a different character from the last season. So when Jinx gets her little adopted child buddy, she has like speed run into being like, oh, this is what Silco and Vander were basically doing for me.
I'd actually argue she's taking on Vi's role. Now Isha's a little bit less her daughter and more her younger sister.
And
I think she actually says that overtly at one point. But she looks at Isha and she sees younger version of herself, and that means she ends up almost filling Vi's role in a strange way. And it's interesting because the first 3 episodes are very much about characters taking on different roles. By the end of that, Vi is left in almost exactly the same position Powder was left at the end of episode 3 in season 1, when we get, again, Caitlyn doing the little police brutality and abandoning her down the big hole. You know, the exact same, you know, hurt by somebody you love and then abandoned by them, which is just great. Super good, Caitlyn. Very nice. And after that, Caitlyn takes on a role that I actually saw a few people point out. She's almost taking on Silco's role, up to and including mirroring large elements of his design, like the big coat and the sort of lankier hair kind of situation. There's even a few shots where she's like looking at the Jinx wanted poster, and the specific way that the reflection of Jinx's bang is overlaying onto Caitlyn's face makes it look like she has Silco's fucked up scar eye thing, which is pretty cool. Savika was taking on almost the role of Vander, like actually kind of trying to like protect Jinx and, you know, keep peace in the Undercity, which was an interesting change for her, because when Silco was in charge, she was very much like, get rid of Jinx, she's a liability. And now that Silco's gone, she's like, damn it, I guess now I have to be loyal to this little snot, which is pretty fun. I thought that was great. And she and Jinx both have that really interesting moment where they're talking about like, damn it, Silco's gone and actually nothing can fill the hole he's leaving behind. Because, you know, if Caitlyn's taking on his symbolic role, it's not like she's doing shit to run the Undercity. She's just causing problems. Oh, and Caitlyn also, Ambessa essentially uses her as substitute daughter figure who she actually can manipulate because Mel's out of the picture getting fucking backrooms by the Black Rose, so that's fun. Jace is almost entirely out of the politics game by the end of that because, you know, the entire council exploded and he's mostly just extremely depressed about Victor leaving. But there's a lot of extremely overt intentionality of...
Jace kind of gets Heimerdingered.
Kinda, yeah, in the sense that, like, he knows what's up, but nobody will listen to him, and oops, I accidentally created a thing that's grown out of control. I don't know, I think that they did a really careful job of making the characters at the beginning of Season 2 have to take on the roles of characters in Season 1 who they were not prepared to replicate. The almost transposition of, like, Vi and Jinx, I think, is one of the juicier ones of those, because Jinx has to be a bigger sister, and Vi is abandoned and completely falling apart by the time Jinx comes back to get her, which I thought was interesting. Poor Vander.
It's a good show. Poor Vander.
Actual heartbreaking tragedy what went down with him. But I do think that it was kind of nice how they showed clearly the last thing that's going on in his, like, I guess, mind palace is just him tucking in Vi and Powder into bed and then blowing out the candle and then just going away. Just like, oh man, that's just where he lives forever. That's what goes on in his mind, even while his body is a rampaging chemtech werewolf.
When, like, the piece of paper burns away, like, that was catastrophic.
That was absolutely devastating, my God. It was a very good show. I think we both, while we were watching it, we were like, there's a density of information coming through here that we're going to need to, like, unpack again on multiple watches.
It easily could have gotten a third season for what they were trying to do in this season, and... It's like, yeah, okay, they probably could have 3 more episodes, and they could have maybe gotten the pacing that would have been more in line with Season 1. I still really like everything the way it played out, because what they were able to do in the end is really, really impressive, especially with this kind of a runtime. But the whole creation of Arcane at all is frankly a little bit of insanity, because the economics of making a show like that for especially Netflix, which is like, make it as cheap as possible, make it as boring as possible, so people don't look up from their phones, get confused, and turn it off, so that way we can keep watch time up. Like, for the whole, Fortiche and the Riot team to want to make this is crazy, and the fact that we got this at all is ridiculous. And I think it was like a $250 million budget for Arcane, or for this
Something
season
like that,
specifically. And the Riot boss is like, yeah, I mean, we're not a show company, we're a video game company, and these numbers make sense for us because they just have that much money to play with. It's like, oh yeah, League of Legends still not a great game to play, especially if you want to like your fellow humans. But it is a commitment to the art to have put in the efforts to make a show like this, and the fact that we got a Season 1, a Season 2 at all is a huge accomplishment. And an investment in creating art truly for the sake of art, because it did not increase player count of League of Legends enough for maybe what the investment might have needed to justify. But
Arcane is a game changer, I guess. I felt the same watching it as I did the first time I saw Into the Spider-Verse in theaters. Like, there was that little moment where I was like, oh, this is what you can do with 3D animation. And then I was like, oh, this is going to change how people think about 3D animation. I felt the same way watching Arcane Season 1 and 2. Like, I think Season 1 was very tightly woven to the point where when we were talking about it, we didn't really talk that much about Victor and Jace when we were talking about Season 1, because, like, all the character drama was bound up in, Vi and Jinx and Caitlyn and all this complicated stuff, and it seemed like Victor and Jace were almost ancillary to that. And then you watch Season 2 and you're like, oh, that's why the show's called Arcane, because actually it is all about Victor and Jace. And you'd be forgiven, I think, for not putting that together, because the juiciest character drama is still Vi and Jinx and Vander and Caitlyn and all that stuff. This show was doing a lot of different things, and I think it absolutely succeeded in what it set out to do. I think a lot of the complaints I saw about the season were mostly people being like, I thought we were going in a different direction. Again, like we talked about earlier in the presentation, like, Season 1 was so strongly about the Piltover-Zahn class divide and like the seemingly unmendable rift between them. And then Season 2 kind of made it clear that like that was the setup. That's not what the show is actually going to be about. And I didn't mind it. I liked that in Season 2 the power curve got kind of shifted upwards. You know, we started getting people playing with magic like in an actually major way.
Because in Season 1, all the hex tech is pretty cordoned off. It exists very industrially, and it's only by the very end that like Jace builds the hammer, Vi gets the gloves, and we get a little bit of like, okay, there's shimmer, people are acting a little bit weird with, you know, all these super drugs essentially, but it's in Season 2 that the magic kind of cracks open the world a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that they did a really good job of showing that magic is an actual game changer, and this is why everyone's afraid of it. There's that one little bit in the final fight where Mel basically pulls out the Black Rose Pokeball, and just immediately Ambessa is like, has lost. Like, she's gone from winning the fight to just immediately losing and dying in her arms like 30 seconds later. And it's like, oh shit. This is the kind of power that these people are dealing with. Like no wonder. Maybe Heimerdinger was onto something a little bit with like, this could be bad. Also, like, this is a completely side note. I actually love just the tiny little detail they did about the magic system in this show. Because, like, when they're talking about hex tech and wild runes, like, it's a big concept to drop after no foreshadowing in Season 1. But Jace's explanation of it basically being like, yeah, you know, you use words to tell somebody to do something, that's hex tech. You know, we give a specific set of commands and the magic responds. But if I tell you to do the same thing over and over again, you get frustrated and sigh, and that's also a form of communication, and that is also a form of magic. And it's like a magic system that can get annoyed with you if you use it too much.
Incredible.
That's
I love
amazing.
That detail so much.
That's such a fucking cool, like, wow, okay, so Jace and Victor were actually fucked from the outset. They truly thought, like, we can make Magitech and give it to everybody, and it just, they had no way of knowing that the simple rules of the universe demand that if you do that too much, the magic will stop acting the way you thought it would. I thought that was so interesting.
Magic is actually fussy and contrarian.
Yeah, the idea that magic has not necessarily a will, but enough of a consciousness to get mad when you use it too much. The eldritch implications of that are incredible. And like, the fact that it started to cause reality to actually glitch, terrifying. Yeah. I loved it. I thought that was amazing. Yeah, no, I don't know. There's so many world building elements of this were so cool. And I'm very interested to see what this team does when they get a hold of, like, you know, other elements of League lore, because because it's such a funny contrast. Because, of course, I was looking up some of this stuff. I was like, oh, who's this character everyone keeps talking about showing up in this? Or, like, who's that? Whatever. And the difference in writing quality between anything that was in Arcane and anything that hasn't yet been touched by the Arcane team, it's night and day. It's like, wow, and this is Piltover and Zahn, an extremely intricate network of class division and deeply ingrained injustices. And this is the Asian fusion Grushan Islands, where all the wise people are from. It's like, oh, cool, good job. Anyway. Yeah.
I'm fascinated to see what Fortiche does next. Their next project, recently announced at time of recording, is a sci-fi feature film, Penelope of Sparta, inspired by Greek mythology.
Really?
Yes. This is 100%
next?
true.
That's before the Noxus show? Crazy.
Well, I think it's like a different section of the Fortiche team. It is apparently currently in production. I think Noxus might be a little further along.
Wow.
But also, you know, television show versus a movie. But I'm fascinated to see what they do when they can just go absolutely nuts in a completely separate direction.
Yeah, definitely. I did see the Noxus trailer. You didn't, because I told you there were spiders in it.
There's spiders.
It does look like it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of stuff that they could do with it. I don't know shit about any of these characters, so I'll be interested to see what's up. One of them likes using spiders a lot. That's all I got. I remember we had a conversation after we got through episode 9 where we were like, are we happy with how the show ended? And it was a little bit wobbly. It was weird because the show was so good, but we were like, I wish there was more of it. And also, there was this slight specific frustration that we had, I think, or at least that I had, where I was like, I kind of wanted the show to end on like an "and the adventure continues" thing. I assumed we were setting up the status quo of League of Legends, which is like, Jinx is a problem causer, Caitlyn and Vi are Piltover's finest, Echo is best boy. And it's just like, yeah, set this all up, you know, let them have the powers they have in the show. Like, Echo has his time engine for like 5 minutes, and then it explodes, and he doesn't have it anymore. I was like, well, there goes his in-game design. Vi cannot have her gloves for more than like 10 minutes at a time before they get absolutely exploded beyond repair. There's also like little elements where I guess the design team were maybe floating some ideas and then didn't end up using them, because like I was watching some of the TB Sky and little shorts where he unpacks character designs, and the Arcane skin for Vi that you can get for League of Legends, one of her gauntlets has been like cobbled together out of spare parts. Like she's got one that's intact and the other one looks like it's been like ramshackledly repaired, and like that's a cool concept. Wasn't in the show. Why is it on the skin? Yeah. Like, things like that make me wonder, like, what could have this season looked like if maybe they had more time to really get into the characterization, or, you know, let the characters breathe a little bit more. But we ended up in this weird space where, like, each of the characters briefly passes through their most iconic character design and then loses access to it. Like, by the end of the season, Jinx is presumed dead. Like, we know she's fine, right? Like, they dropped 3 separate hints that, oh, we saw a little streak of her using her shimmer super speed to get out of the explosion, and then also we saw Caitlyn looking at the vent design of the tower she was in, so she could have escaped, and then we see the airship flying away, and that's the final shot of the show, and the Powder's introduction scene is her looking at an airship and saying, one day I'm gonna ride one of those things. So like, yeah, obviously she's alive, but nobody in the city knows that, so like she can't do her thing. So like we've managed to completely eradicate the status quo implied in the vibe of League of Legends. Like these characters cannot.
Which is fine. Yeah,
I
think that's fine.
The thing is, like, that's the part where I was sort of running into the problem, where I was like, I want these characters to be able to do more, but unfortunately my only option for that is League of Legends. So it's like, I want more of these versions of these characters. I want more time with them. I want them to have more time to breathe. But League of Legends is not giving me that, baby.
Unfortunately, the adventure continues.
Yeah, so I think that was the part where it was kind of throwing me, where I'm like, yeah, I like how this ended, but I wish it had given me like twice as many episodes before that. And, you know, insert rant about streaming culture, 9-episode seasons here. But like, I do think that, you know, they did really good work, and what we got was really good. I think it could have only benefited from more time, but I'm also not mad that we got it when we did, because what we got was super good. But that's the sort of conflict I ended up feeling by the end there. I was like, oh, it's good, but I would like it more if there was more of it, and there isn't more of it, and now they're doing other stuff instead. And it's like, is it too much to hope that my girls will return in one of the like 5 million sequels they're going to start making? Because I'd be happy with that. I think it would be comedy itself if in the middle of a completely unrelated season, Jinx is just around in the background. You know, munching on a snack, hanging out, doesn't even have lines, whatever, just vibing.
Get working on those coffee shop AUs, gang.
Oh, I've been seeing a lot of people tapping into that same reflex. You know, a show like this invites fan fiction, and it leaves a lot of spaces for people to fill, which I think is pretty interesting.
Interesting phrasing when talking about fan fiction. Go off.
Hey, I said spaces to fill, not holes to fill. I've learned. Anyway, really fucking, that was real Coyote walking into his own trap to see if it was functional of me, wasn't it? Anywho, I think that Arcane works best as a whole unit. I think if you watch season 1 individually and then you go into season 2 and you're like, I was expecting more of season 1, you're going to be a little bit thrown for a loop, because that's not what season 2 is. But I think there are a lot of elements of season 2 that make the most sense in the full context of season 1. Didn't we run into that problem where like you hadn't rewatched season 1 very recently? So there were a lot of points where you were like, who's that guy? And I was like, that's a crucial character from season 1. And you're like, cool, okay. Yeah, there were a few moments like that. I think it definitely would benefit from a full watch through. I'll probably do that at some point in the near future, just to see how well all the themes tie together when both seasons are taken as a unit. But yeah, man, I don't know. Yeah. It's weird seeing an entire show built on the design principles of music videos.
It's really cool. It's a very fascinating way to do storytelling, because it's so different.
Yeah.
It's so different.
I think it explains a lot of why the characters show rather than tell. You know, if you're making a music video, you're not including dialogue, so all the characters have to show through their actions and body language what they're up to in a very readable way.
And it's like musicals exist, but it's a very different kind of film language where you are packing a lot more information density with a music video, especially like for video games and stuff, versus a musical where it's like, okay, this is a dance number and there's singing, whereas in music videos, it's like there's a bunch of stuff happening, not necessarily dancing. In fact, usually not dancing when it's video games. And also there's music, but other discussions for other people to have.
That's true. I also think that it helps that all these characters have extremely like strong symbolic motifs to use. Like when I started watching season 2, my first out loud "oh hell yeah" was in the intro animation when I noticed that Echo had 2 shadows and they were ticking like the hands on a clock. And then in hindsight, it was even more of a hell yeah because somebody pointed out they were ticking backwards. So, and like, what the fuck? That's amazing. Of course, you have a character whose entire gimmick is time. And like, even before he invented the time engine thingy back in season 1, the entire Dynasties and Dystopias music video seems like it takes place in a time rewind, to the point where I assumed that he had some kind of time rewind ability in season 1 because that's just what that music video is. And I was like, no, that was symbolic actually. They're just having a fight. He played it out in his mind palace first, and now he's just gonna have the real fight. The opening animation, everyone's like referencing famous plays, giving Caitlyn the Lady Macbeth shit, or I guess just Maiden Macbeth. You know, OG Macbeth, with the shadows of her fingers forming a crown in the background. It's bonkers. It's so simple and elegant, but extremely effective. Again, like, unsubtle symbolism is what this team is really good at. You know, just showing you through the environment design and the character body language exactly what's going on with them. And I think it's so cool, and I'm excited for them to do more of it. I wish they'd done more of it here, but that's okay. I'm not mad. I'm very grateful for what we got.
This isn't going anywhere. It's a miracle that it exists at all.
That's true, yeah. That really is the vibe. So if you haven't watched it, you should. Sorry for all the spoilers. Well, watch Arcane, don't play League of Legends, and
bye!